Hello and welcome to the Big Debate on S3, the SABC News Channel 404, YouTube and on TikTok. My name is Tembekile Mkhototo. For thousands of years, humankind learned to look after the earth that provides the basis for life. Well, in the 20th century, in our quest for development, we seem to have forgotten the planet. Our oceans are polluted, our energy resources are depleting, and our climate is threatened, and the poor bear the brunt. South Africa is still addicted to coal. We borrowed billions to build two of the largest coal-fired power stations in the world. An ANC front company received corrupt payments from those deals. After all that, we still have load shedding. So are there any real alternatives, if you will? Can we empower the most vulnerable to play a leading role in the move towards a sustainable life? Can we make rich countries pay for the damage that they've already done to the planet? In short, how do we achieve environmental justice in South Africa? With me to discuss this are Desigan Naidu from the Presidential Climate Commission, Samson Mampweli of the National Energy Institute within government, Nkateko Chauke is from Oxfam, award-winning environmental activist Nonhle Mbutuma from Kolobeni is also with us, and we have Adil Chabeleng from Transform RSA, Lisa Makaula of Green Connection, Sibusiso Mazomba of Cancel Coal, and Victor Munich of Wits University. In the audience, we have climate scientists, activists, specialists, and of course, community leaders and residents. Welcome to you all. So, what is your view? Should we leave the oil in the soil and the coal in the hole? Before we start our debate, have a look at this.
Humanity is facing a climate catastrophe that the United Nations have confirmed is human-made, caused by the burning of coal, oil and gas, deforestation and overall planetary destruction, often fueled by profits.
Surprisingly, some people, including politicians, still talk as if the climate crisis is something in the future. If we continue on this reckless, suicidal path that we're on, we will be gone as a species.
Some argue that it's Africa's time to benefit from its resources.
Africa has its own unique problems: poverty, infrastructure, unemployment. We have, countries completely in a collapsed state.
Government claims to be committed to a just transition to renewable energy, but at the highest level, not everyone seems to be on board.
We are cautioning people who say coal is coming to an end. We have 16 power stations that are coal generated. That is the reality that we face today as we sit here.
Government is extending the life of some of our dirtiest power stations, while young activists are calling for an extinction rebellion to save humanity. Nonhle Mbutuma received global recognition for blocking offshore exploration by the multinational oil company Shell in the Wild Coast.
Development really must be determined by our children's future, not by corporate profit.
Even where South Africa has brought in renewable energy, the projects are often owned by foreign banks and their profits are removed from the country. Some communities have a unique solution to the problem of coal, corruption, and concentration of energy ownership. Residents in Impumalweni Township in the Highveld region of Mpumalanga are harnessing solar power to build a brighter and sustainable future.
Our government is failing us. It's been years I've been staying here, but it's still the same. We still don't have electricity, we still don't have water. Because I don't have electricity, I use the VAM solar system. There are a lot of people who are using that solar system, and they are very happy. They are very much happy.
For the first time ever, this community has an uninterrupted supply of electricity. Yet despite this progress, residents are still faced with pollution from nearby coal mines.
My sister's son, he grew up with asthma. He was diagnosed with asthma when he was 2 months, so he had to use the pumps. They called us at around 11, and when we got there, they showed us his body and he was already gone.
Mina njengami ukuthi umoya ungcolile angitshelwa umuntu.
We can't afford to be timid anymore. We've got to be bold and daring.
Community members hope that the new energy projects will lead to a healthier and more prosperous future. But government and business will have to come on board.
There is an alternative, and it's an alternative that is rising from voices within the labor movement, local environmental activists, a variety of ordinary people who realize that the planet needs to be protected for our own good and collective benefit.
Let's bring in the panel now. Professor Samson Mampoli, let me start with you. So if coal is bad for the environment, why have we even extended the lifespan of some of the coal-fired power stations all the way up to 2030 in some instances?
Yeah, so maybe I need to explain in detail what the minister was saying there. So South Africa is pursuing an energy mix, which basically means that our energy mix is going to contain coal, nuclear, renewables, and in terms of, we have an energy plan, which is called the Integrated Resource Plan, that guides us in terms of how much of each of the technologies should contribute in our energy mix. We're facing an energy crisis that we need to deal with. We have learned from some of the developed world, some of the developed countries such as China, to say when you are in a crisis, you first deal with the crisis and then you deal with the climate issues. But however, even when we do that as South Africa, we are introducing a lot of renewable energy. If you look at the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Program that is run by government, there's quite a lot of procurement that has been done. The removal of the licensing requirements when you want to build your renewable energy power plants by government. We have seen a lot of projects that have been registered, totaling above 12 gigawatts that will be coming on board.
So but the renewables are a fraction, aren't they? They remain a very small fraction at this point.
Yes, the renewables remain a small fraction, but we're seeing the ramp up in terms of renewables. For instance, with the government introducing the rebate program on the solar energy side of things, we've seen up to about 6 gigawatts of rooftop solar PV that has been installed by households and businesses, which is part of the reasons why we don't have load shedding today. And another reason why we don't have load shedding today is the fact that Eskom has been able to fix some of the coal fleet to operate at above 60% energy availability factor. The assumptions that were made in the IRP 2010 and also in the IRP 2019 was that we will have the coal fleet operating at 70% energy availability factor, and then we will decommission as time goes.
I don't want us to go too much into the technical language, especially because I think that's when we talk about energy, a lot of us get lost. Nonhle, but I want to come to you. Based on what Professor Mampoli was saying, it sounds like it's an absolutely necessary energy mix that includes coal.
You know, there's a statement that a professor just mentioned. He says that even if we do have the climate catastrophe, but we need to sort it out, the energy crisis first. Which means, and the question that I have, if the climate catastrophe, it kills us right now, there's no time for wait. Yeah. Now, if you said you did that later, where we will be? We'll be gone. The first priority, deal with the climate catastrophe. That's the thing that we all call upon our government, that we do have alternative to energy, which is renewable energy. But you can see that that's not an option because coal, it's more easier for making profit and it's more easier for BE that they can make money quick.
Adol, it sounds from what Nonhle is saying that what we're basically dealing with here is a choice between life or electricity. Is that what's going on here?
It's more than that, actually. If you look at the composition of electricity, it's mainly made out of resources, which is your coal, which is your fossil fuels, which is your, what you call a hydro, right? And then the renewables are made out of the same, resources I'm talking about. They come out of coal, they come out of the, what do you call it, electricity that is produced from coal and the technology. To produce renewables today, it takes 6 times the amount of resources required than to use coal. So when we balance the two, one must understand it's not either or. Both are energy devils because they are causing environmental havoc. We're talking about greening the environment. We're talking about having clean air. But majority of people here are all wearing things that are not even green. The t-shirts, the clothing are all made out of synthetic fabrics, which are made out of oil, which are made out of what you call fossil fuels, and are made out from where? From petroleum. So some of the things we say, we don't actually bring them into the reality of the discussion and the discourse. On the electricity side of it, let me explain to you. You cannot have an electricity generation of a nation like South Africa without base load, coal, nuclear, hydro, or a mix of the others. And that is the reason why we're enjoying the no load shedding. Professor has just indicated that we're having no load shedding because of rooftop. No, that's not the case. We're having no load shedding because Eskom's coal power plants are working and the nuclear power plants are working.
You were shaking your head, you don't agree.
I totally do not agree. Yes, the initial onset when you have to install or actually build the panels or the wind turbines, you do need some fossil fuels depending on whether you get your ethylene from e-ethylene or from normal ethylene, which is based off of fossil fuels. Secondly, to generate the coal, the electricity via coal, you will have to continually mine for this coal, and you'll have to continually perpetuate the amount of emissions that is coming from these power stations. Whereby if you go to a renewable kind of power generation, you will be having a once-off offset of a lot of emissions, and then you'll have a continuation where there's little to none, and then maybe at the end where there has to be decommissioned, there would be emissions again. So it's an issue between continuous constant emissions from start to finish to decommission, where you, with the fossil fuel industry as is right now, versus emissions at the start and maybe some emissions at the end where there's little to no in the duration. So you cannot say that renewable energy is going to continuously pollute the people. That is erroneous.
Gatekwa, is there any way of getting away from an energy mix in this country that does not include coal?
One thing that I think we really need to recognize is, no doubt, coal is the biggest contributor to GDP in South Africa. Let's get that out of the way. Two is that right now, the sector employs at least 100,000 people. So we have people involved in this conversation. So recognizing the realities of our economy, an energy mix at this point in time is to help us realize that a just transition has to be progressive. While we shift to renewable energy sources, we need to take into consideration that we need to allow our economy to also shock absorb some of the things that are going to happen as this unfolds. So in the future, yes, I mean, as Oxfam, we are pushing also for considering and highly encouraging governments to phase out fossil fuels. And we really need to take into context that what's happening in the global south is far different from what's happening in the global north. So we cannot do it in a rapid manner, but it must take place. And when it takes place, it has to really put people at the center. So the idea that we have to deal with the crisis at hand before we tackle the energy crisis at hand, before we tackle environmental issues is also null and void. These things happen concurrently.
Got you. Victor Monique, let me come to you. Deco talks about not a rapid phasing, not having a situation where there's a rapid phasing out of coal. Are the current deadlines, for example, for the decommissioning of these coal-fired power stations realistic? Because some of them have had the lifespan extended from 2027 all the way to 2030.
Well, the reason, I think there are two reasons why the deadlines are extended. The one is to get measures into place to make the transition possible. So people get new jobs, new businesses are developed, there's a regional economic strategy to replace coal. So that's reasonable. However, if we don't do that and we just extend the life of the power stations, we do a lot of other things. One thing is the pollution of the people who live around these power stations. And I know there are people in this audience who live there and who suffer, you've seen in the... so that is a decision to extend the life of the power stations without having a health program by the Department of Health to deal with all that damage. And by the way, in the PCC meeting, a question was asked of Eskom whether they are prepared for a lawsuit from the people whose health will be impacted by this extension, or whether, people must just pay for it themselves when their health is impacted.
Thank you for that. So we'll continue this conversation in a moment, and we'll look at what the people of Mpumalanga have been saying when it comes to the issue of how damage to the environment has affected them. They've also now been installing their own solar panels. You're watching The Big Debate. Welcome back to The Big Debate on environmental justice. So since 2011, government has commissioned over 120 projects to generate electricity. That is from wind and the sun. But 55% of the projects are owned by a small number of foreign multinationals. As we saw in the opening of the show, residents in Mpumalanga have installed their own solar energy now without foreign ownership. So why is that important? We'll speak to them in a moment. But first, I want to bring in Sibongile Masina, whose story we also heard a bit of right at the top of the program. And Sibongile, if I can ask you to stand up, because as we talk about climate, it's easy to get caught up in the science and the numbers, but you lost your 11-year-old nephew to asthma, and you believe it was linked directly to the environmental damage where you stay.
Yes, it is true.
Tell us more about the situation in terms of your nephew and what has been going on with the environment there.
Okay, my nephew developed asthma when he was 2 months old, but he was born okay, but after 2 months he developed asthma. and we live at Malahleni, and we have a lot of mines and power stations. So after 2 months, we took him to the doctor, and he started using pumps. Then he used pumps until he was 11 years. But it was getting worse instead of getting better.
Right.
The pumps were not working by the time goes on. So,
And what was the quality of life in the environment that you think made it worse for him?
okay, in our place, at Emalahleni, it's very much polluted. So he used to get attacks at night. So when I did the research, I found out that emissions are released mostly at night. So at night, he usually gets more attacks. You know.
I'm so sorry. What do you want to see going forward?
Okay, if we can close all the mines and start a renewable energy, which is the solar system, because right now I was also using coal to make fire, because where I stay, I don't have electricity, but I live at Emalahleni, where they
make electricity, but you don't have
but
it.
I don't have electricity. So when VEM, which is the organization that I'm in, had the solar panels.
Right.
I usually use the solar panels, so I've stopped using the coal, so the life is much better using the solar system.
Thank you so much, and we're so sorry to hear about the death of your nephew. Thank you for sharing. I want to come in here and bring you in, Promise, because you're also from Mpumalanga. You're installing your own solar panels. How is that better from what is done by perhaps some of the bigger companies?
Speaking of Mpumalanga, is easy when you are not living in Mpumalanga. But the people who are living in Mpumalanga, they are experiencing hell on earth. So for us, installing the solar PV or the solar panels, because we started raising awareness within our communities around the climate change on how we can deal with the situation, starting from an early stage. So we decided that when we engage with communities, the problem of questions that were coming was that, what can we do when the weather goes? So we decided that let us have an installation within our office so that each and every community member can come in to learn on how it works, how to take care of it, and how it works for your household. So that's why we have that installation. They come in to charge their phones. Those who are feeding their children with milk, they come and boil water. We just want to make them feel that they own it and to feel that this is usable. They can rely on it.
Thank you, sis. Jessica, let me bring you in. So you've got, on the one hand, the real life effects, right, of a filthy environment for all intents and purposes for people who live around these solar stations. You've got a community that's doing its best then to integrate solar, but the space is still not as friendly, as open as it should be to people such as Promise.
It's exactly that. I think that the cruelest thing that we have done in this country is to make people, force people to choose between a clean environment that they can live in and a livelihood. How dare we? We need to accelerate the transition to clean energy so that people can have a livelihood and live in a safe environment. I mean, just to go back to the point that Samson raised earlier, because he talked about China. China is a very interesting example because it talks about proportionality. The rate of investment in cleaner energy options far outweighs the continued investment in high carbon options. At the end of this 14th basic plan, they're going to be at more than 1,000 gigawatts of renewable energy just from solar and wind. This is where we need to be. And to go back to Andira's point, if you continue to have the majority of your mix being high carbon, then everything gets tainted with a high carbon. There is only one choice for South Africa.
But the other problem, though,
move.
Desigan, is that when you listen to government, especially in the last 2 months or so, it sometimes feels as if, especially in cabinet, that the ministers weren't on the same page, because you've got Gwede Mandasha who said, hang on a bit, we're not going to be able to rapidly phase out coal, while some of his colleagues were suggesting that actually it would be a much quicker process.
Yes, but that very same Gwede Mandasha is very clear that the end point is renewable energy.
Oh, absolutely.
He's absolutely clear about that.
The frustration for people was that they were getting confused in how it was going to happen, how soon.
Indeed. But that was the 6th administration. We are in the 7th administration now. So.
Is that your out? Is that your easy out tonight? No, then Desigan says, I mean, there's a new administration coming in. Do you have any faith that this set of cabinet ministers, same president, will do better?
Unfortunately, I don't have any faith to the new cabinet that is coming, because every time you see, if you look, the ocean in South Africa is marked red for fossil fuel, the whole ocean in South Africa. It means that this is the way to go. While we are dying with the global warming, with the heat wave, with the floods, it's very clear that even the new cabinet is going to take where the others they left. That is the current situation. That is why when we talk about the climate catastrophe, let's put the lives of the people first before profit. Yes. If the coal is the one that it helps the energy in South Africa, we cannot have this crisis of energy that we have right now.
Samson Mampoli, we have a crisis, but there's no faith in the decision makers and the people who are supposed to lead us in the right direction.
I disagree in that, because we need to look at the plans at hand. And South Africa's plan towards decarbonization is very clear. We have the integrated resource plan that I talked about. It has just been revised. And the revised integrated resource plan talks about the just energy transition. And the language that we're now using is the balanced just energy transition. What we're saying is that don't shut down all the coal fleet now and do away with the jobs. You heard about the number of people that are employed in the coal sector as an example.
Hang on a minute, let's allow him to finish.
Cost of health, so that we can reach a balance. They say balance because ordinary people are still paying with their own health.
I want you to start over so we can all hear you. Please stand up for me.
And briefly, can they improve the cost of health, the cost of the water contamination, so that we can see how balanced coal is in the equation. Because currently people are paying for that, not them, not industry. That's why they say coal is cheap, because we are paying with our lives.
Samson Mampoli, you're saying coal is cheap, they are paying with their lives. How do you respond?
So what am I saying? Government has never said that we will continue with coal. Government has said...
Let's allow him to finish. Let's allow him to finish.
I need to be clear. I need to be clear. Look at the government plan, and I'm talking about the plan that is in place now, the revised integrated resource plan. It says...
Let's allow him to finish. I'll open it up for questions. Thank you, sir.
The revised IRP, Tebegile, it says, let us extend the life of the coal fleet that can give us longevity, and then we deal with the energy crisis, have security of supply of electricity, so that we don't lose the jobs in the country. You must remember that the jobs are not only in the coal sector. They are also in other sectors where we're supplying electricity. When we have load shedding, the economy loses billions of rands. At some point, we're looking at about 500 billion that is being eroded together with jobs.
So it's a balancing of the scales.
So it's the balancing of the scales to say, in the future, if you look at the draft document that I'm talking about, it talks about ramping up renewables, tripling renewables in the future, so that we do away with coal and even bringing in the emission abatement technologies that we are working on as things stand.
How do we balance what's in the documents, what's in the plans, with the very real experiences of the people in these communities?
I mean, I've been hearing a lot of comments, and I must say, also from Prof, I'm a bit shaken by a few of the points that he made. Particularly, he spoke of the policy that we currently have. It's still a draft. It's not finalized yet. It's the electricity plan. For someone who doesn't know what that policy means that he's talking about, it's the electricity plan. And when you look at that electricity plan and you look for the 2023 draft and you compare it to the 2019 electricity plan, there's a huge difference. This one is mostly comprised of coal, but when you look at that one, it was mostly comprised of renewables. So it's like we are scaling back. So where are we actually going as a country? And then at the same time, when you look at the broader energy, I mean the legislative of it, we are supposed to be having an integrated energy plan. And we had to take government to court to actually bring into action that integrated energy plan. So the integrated energy plan, it's a broader energy plan for South Africa, which the IRP falls under. So they cannot have an electricity plan without having an energy plan, which looks into economical sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social development.
I want to hold on that point, actually, and bring you in, because what you want is the cancellation of coal in the mix. Am I right?
No, that's not
Misconception.
true. Yes.
Okay, talk to me about how you see it all working.
Yes. So the Cancel Coal campaign, contrary to what most people believe, and maybe to some extent the name, is that we're cancelling all coal all at one go, which is not possible because South Africa is a developing country that is very highly reliant on coal. So what we are calling for is a just transition away from coal. The just transition, which will be gradual. We're not saying switch off coal overnight.
How gradual should gradual be, Sbu?
Gradual in 2050. So there's different time periods. There's from now to 2030, which is in the IRP. The IRP does say that by 2030, we will have about, I think, 11,000 megawatts of renewables. We're currently sitting at 6,000 megawatts, which is, we're quite, have some ground to cover. So what we're saying is that you need to, take into account that we are a developing country, but at the same time, we are dealing with climate change. The health of mining-affected communities in Emalahleni is being affected. And so I think reiterating some of the points that have been made is that we cannot look at climate change and the electricity crisis and the just transition as three different things.
So they're all linked.
Instead, they are all very much connected, and what we need to do is to, take multiple approaches at once and make sure that we are protecting the health of mining-affected communities, but also at the same time transitioning away from coal in a manner that won't affect people who are reliant on the coal industry for jobs, for livelihoods, and for their communities as well.
So Ulrich, Sbu gives us the goal. Is it achievable?
It's achievable given that this just energy transition is progressive and actually inclusive and transformative. Because it doesn't matter that you're just changing the plug where the energy is coming from coal to renewables, but the status quo remains the same. This is the same issue that we're having within our governmental bodies. Yes, we may change the ministers, we can shuffle up the cabinet, but the decision makers, the policy implementers within these ministries, they are the ones who are continually pushing for our constant crisis averting policies such as, no, we have an energy shortfall. Let's get car powership to resolve this crisis. When you look into the planning of that car powership thingy, they're planning to have a crisis for 20 years. Who's planning to have a crisis for 20 years? Secondly, we do not have the infrastructure to go and plug and play onto these projects. None of these things are truly inclusive or truly transformative to develop our country forward. We do have the resources. We do have ample renewable resources. We've had ample opportunity to transform. We've had ample investment opportunities. We've turned them down because we are addicts to the fossil fuel industry. This gentleman has clearly stated that majority of our synthetic products is from fossil fuels. There are alternatives to get these things, but because our industrial revolution was built off of the backs of fossil fuels, we will not be able to divorce them because it's now status quo.
Let's leave it there, Ulrich, because when we come back, we will meet the invisible heroes of sustainability in South Africa. You're live with The Big Debate. Welcome back to the big debate on environmental justice. Every time we fill up our rubbish bins, we generate waste, which then goes to landfills, which then pollutes our water sources in some areas. And land is running out for these sites in our cities. Can we avoid then drowning in a sea of toxic waste? Have a look.
Eva Mukwena is a mother, grandmother, and a second-generation reclaimer, following the legacy her mother set out.
I used to come here and sort normally. My mom used to go and work, then he'll leave the bags as you can see here. Then I'll come back from school following her, then come and sort. I'm not a waste picker because waste doesn't get recycled. I reclaim because when you throw away your laptop and it has a fault, I picked it up, I reclaim it, go and fix it and reuse it again.
In fact, we are making something from nothing. We're making sure that our families survive.
Eva's story challenges much of the stigma around recycling work. As a matriculant, Eva decided to leave her teaching job for an industry where she can be more in control.
I was an ECD teacher. Then I left because there was not enough money there. Then my mom taught me that no, you can make a living out of yourself. Then I followed the family legacy and came back to do recycling.
I used to work before. I used to work for Pick n Pay. After injury, I left the job. But now, the money that I was doing at Pick n Pay, I make it double here.
South Africa's metropolitans generate tens of millions of tons in waste every year, the bulk of which goes to landfills, causing environmental damage. Overall, our system of waste disposal hinges on the recycling work of reclaimers to keep it from collapse, but their work is still so far from the recognition it deserves.
People who had been earning maybe 200 rands from collecting were now earning about 50 rand. What was the reason? The reason was that they were being chased away from the streets, their materials were being confiscated. That process of organizing started and led to a march in 2017 and demands, you know, that the city stops its privatization drive and to recognize the fact that there are invisible men and women who know more than anyone else in this country how waste moves.
We do support each other in most of the things, but the thing is that our own youth are the ones that don't understand.
As capitalism and consumer culture push us into an increasingly unstable world, it has become more urgent than ever to rethink our relationship with the land and its resources.
One reclaimer said that, you know, we are the invisible heroes of the environment. We may not have intentionally started off by thinking of saving the planet, but actually by doing this work, reclaiming our dignity. That's exactly what we're doing.
Let's speak to one of the reclaimers you saw in that film, Eva Mukwena, who's with us. Mama, please stand up for us. You used to be a school teacher, used to be a teacher, now you're a reclaimer.
Yes.
Financially, there's a benefit. Environmentally, though, are you seeing a difference from the work that you're doing?
Yes, I am seeing a difference because ever since we started doing recycling, especially as the organizations, the stigma that people has on reclaimers has reduced. Especially in the high-earning area, you'll find that most of the people, they don't appreciate reclaimers. They take us as thieves, thugs, or people who are going to rob them. But since as the organization, we open people's eyes that we are human beings. We are fathers and mothers that are raising their kids with the mandate we do on recyclables.
And I want to bring in one of your colleagues, in fact, over here. Bablui, thank you so much, Ma'am Eva, thank you. You are also a reclaimer. You're a reclaimer. Why shouldn't the work of collecting refuse be left to, for example, in Johannesburg, we've got Pick It Up. Why should people like you be allowed more into the space?
I think we are human beings and we need to be treated like with respect and dignity. In a study that was done by CSIR in 2016, it shows clearly that 80 to 90% of recyclables were collected by reclaimers, meaning the reclaimers have saved the municipality about 740 million in airspace. And now the problem is that municipalities does not acknowledge our existence. Normally when they're making decisions, they are excluding us. They marginalize us because of, they will normally say, no one need a degree to be a reclaimer. So you are nothing, you are just like that thing that is in the bin. So the level of intolerance is too high there, and we need to change that so that people can know that we also have to live life like any other normal person.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you both for the work that you're doing, by the way, in keeping your communities clean. Desigan, so it's clearly profitable, but people who are doing such important work are not getting their due recognition. There's intolerance, there is disrespect, according to Bablui. Why is that? What is being done to make sure that the formal structures, i.e. municipalities, actually incorporate such people to help clean up things?
Well, yeah, this is very critical, actually. I mean, firstly, salute to these people. And if you go to certain cultures in the world, if you go to Japan, for example, a standard thing that you will see in the street is as people are walking by, reclaimers, they stop and they bow because they recognize their importance in a society, and we need to do the same thing. These principles, incidentally, are built into our just transition framework, which is policy of this government. And it's about saying that we need, the societal transformation we want to see isn't just an energy transition. We want to organize to be an inclusive society that actually respects the people, who ensure the sustainability into the system. We need to readjust the mechanisms of society to give much more scope for people to be able to be inside the space. The second point that I want to raise on this issue, and this is really critical, is that what is being demonstrated here is the closing of that loop of what a circular economy means. Waste is not an end. It is the beginning of a new part of the cycle. And the quicker we absorb that, the more chances that we have of being a much more sustainable society.
Adil, if the work of reclaimers has money, how much longer before the private sector swoops in and takes that away from communities such as these? Because that's always the fear, isn't it, in this country, that people start small, they do the work, then a big business sees a gap and takes over.
Look, on the issue of reclaiming, I mean, there's variety of waste. There's e-waste, there's environmental, there's waste that is used, there's waste in terms of copper that has been stolen and reclaimed and sold all over overseas. It's a huge profitable market. In terms of the waste which is collected for reclaiming in terms of electronics and other things, where they could even take plastics and refuse that they reuse to make other products out of it. It's a highly valuable but not that big to the extent where corporate South Africa is interested. This is something that companies should start supporting out of their corporate social responsibility to encourage communities that are doing this wonderful work, people out of Transform RSA who are doing work in terms of reclaiming and doing projects. We have projects in reclaiming as Transform RSA on the environment side of it. And not only that, helping families. I mean, the lady, gave an example of her, a child who died due to, environmental toxicity in terms of environmental. These things are unavoidable. We have to have a heart as a society to say, what can we do to support one another? But at the heart of corporate South Africa, at the heart of policy, and really this is where I really blame Presidential Climate Committee. They ate 10 billion, which was given over to Komati communities for reclaiming as well as for making sure that they can build alternative solutions. They ate it in what? Consultants, they spent it out flights and everything and paid themselves fortunes out of it. That money never went to the communities. So these are the people that must be blamed for those issues.
And really, let me take that. If millions of rands are budgeted and allocated for the betterment,
billion was squandered.
I mean, it's close enough. If that money is allocated, why are the people who it's meant to benefit not seeing the benefit?
Because it hasn't been allocated. Because the bulk of that money that we've been talking about is in the form of concessional loans. The PCC does not take any of these loans. The PCC is not government, it's not private sector either. It's a compact of stakeholders from right across society. That's what the PCC is. The people who are taking the loans.
There was 8.5 billion that was sent into South Africa for rehabilitation, as well as ensuring the community of Komati. This is when they decommissioned the power plants. They said that communities must be given opportunities. So what they're telling us about the loans and everything, it's a doctrine.
That's completely wrong.
Hold on.
Completely wrong.
I'll give you each a chance.
It's a loan from the World Bank, and a portion of that money hasn't even been received by Eskom. And it's not a just transition process. Komati was closed because it's an old power station, and it was costing the economy a lot of money. It's not a gated process. So we need to be very clear. But we need to be very clear. The corporate industry has a responsibility in terms of
You're
waste.
not making any point that we can respect right now. Because you're making a fundamental mistake. You are emotional on one point and you don't make a point.
I will allow you to respond.
No.
Sir,
you cannot misgive him permission.
Let me...
Yeah, make it very clear. We're not going to sit quiet when you're misleading people here. Money was taken and used.
I will allow you to respond.
Yes.
Sir, you've got the mic. Please stand up.
Exactly.
Thank you. I think we need to be very clear.
No, let's
There's not changing money that went to Komati. Komati went to the World Bank to borrow more than $466 million. And that money, up until now, is not in Komati. And we need to be very clear.
Money. You're getting it wrong.
Was never closed.
No, you're getting it wrong.
Thank you.
The UN,
Thank you both.
Let me explain to you now.
Thank you both. I'll give you both
Bring
a
the
chance
point
when
here.
we come back.
You got it
You're
wrong.
live with the big debate. As you can see, things getting heated over the environment. Stay with us. Welcome back to the big debate on environmental justice. Do you think government is committed to a just energy transition, a renewable energy in that mix as well as a healthy environment? If you were watching earlier, you'd have seen that things got a bit tense as we try to make sense of that. Keen to hear your views at home as well as here in the audience as well. I want to bring in a few people who work in the environmental space, and one of them who is here, in fact, is Trisha. Trisha, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for being in. If I can ask you to stand up and give me your sense of your assessment, in fact, of the commitment from government on the issue of the just energy transition.
So I don't know if we know about this, but the just energy transition partnerships are a bit of hogwash. They're absolutely not working for us at all. In fact, what's happening is we talk about all this renewable energy that's being produced for us and for our country, but actually it's not. There's a massive project going on in the Northern Cape at the moment where it's renewable energy that's being produced to be created into green hydrogen, which then gets exported to Europe. None of that energy actually comes to us in South Africa. Meanwhile, people are losing their land because of this. People who have fought for so long to get those title deeds of their land from apartheid days, they're now losing their land because we need to produce green hydrogen to support the energy transition in the north.
Lisa?
I want to agree to that notion that Ms. Ms. Trisha just raised. I mean, the just energy transition currently, I don't think it's just because communities are not being involved in many things. And I believe when we speak about the just energy transition, it should be a bottom-up approach, meaning that it should not leave anyone behind. You cannot make decisions on behalf of the people, but you have not consulted with the people. So now, looking also to just something that Usus Nontle just touched base on, when you're looking at our oceans, they are divided into blocks, and we are supposed to be on a path moving away from fossil fuels to renewables. But when you are looking at the ocean, it's currently divided in blocks, and those blocks are listed off to oil and gas companies. Okay. And when we're talking about oil and gas, that's still a fossil fuel. And now, people on the ground are going to be the ones that will have to bear the brunt and will have to face the dire consequences of climate change. And at the same time, there's been the reports that have been highlighted that, I mean, specifically on the International Energy Agency report, it's been highlighting that there should be no new investments when it comes to oil and gas because there's a possibility that assets could become stranded. So now, why would we be continuing to build infrastructure that is not going to be used in the future? And we are still contributing to a climate crisis. So, I mean, how is it just?
Thank you very much for that. Is it a just transition is one of the questions when we talk about this. When we return, final views from our guests, and we'll also hopefully be able to get a sense of what all of this would mean for Eskom. Don't go away. You're still with the big debate on environmental justice. We're nearing the end of part one of our debate, but fear not, the second part will be live on YouTube as soon as we've said goodbye to our television viewers. Just look for the Big Debate SA if you want to stay with us for the second hour. Before we wrap up this part, though, I want to give the panelists a chance to give us one last thought. And if I can start with you, Doctor.
Thank you. I think it's very important for us to realize the opportunity of the transition to transform not just the dirty energy system, but to also transform society. So let me give an example. There is a possibility for a renewable energy reindustrialization that can create jobs from mining to manufacturing to recycling. We are not paying attention to it, and the opportunity is slipping past because people have silly arguments.
We'll continue on that. I want us to flesh that out in the second part. Ngateko, briefly, please.
I guess from my end is the need to really balance ecological needs with socio-economic outcomes when we think of the just transition. But it's quite sad as well to see
one
how...
thought each. Remember, I said one thought each. We'll continue in the second hour.
Just, we need to really move away from being superficial in our policy processes.
In 45 seconds, we're going to be kicked off TV. One thought each.
People's voices must be heard.
Thank you. One thought?
We've got to prioritize this IRP. Low carbon on the top, high carbon at the bottom.
Nanta, one thought?
Prioritize our livelihood.
Prof?
Transition must be just. We will have a lot of renewable energy installed in South Africa between now and 2050.
The just energy transition should create opportunities for transformation.
The just energy transition is an opportunity for us to change society as a whole and promote public participation, consultation with people on the ground. It has to be bottom up.
Okay, cool. All right.
So, the polluters must pay, and those who have polluted must decommission themselves and not put the blame on us as taxpayers.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And welcome back to the second hour of the Big Debate. I'm Tembekile Mkhototo. We're still talking about the just energy transition or environmental justice in South Africa as things stand today. We've spoken about the impact of coal in communities in Mpumalanga. And in this hour, as ever, we're going to give the audience as much an opportunity as possible to be able to speak directly to the issues and to the panelists. But before we get there, I want to bring in someone who's worked in the energy space for many years. David Nichols is here with us in the audience. Retired from Eskom, but has some interesting views, I think, on how we should be managing this part of South Africa's response to the environmental challenges and indeed our needs when it comes to energy. A very good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining. If I can ask you to please stand up for us. You've heard an hour of discussion. You've had an hour of discussion in this room tonight. Are we on the right path?
I think there's a number of issues, and you've asked me to comment on them. The first one I say is the just energy transition. It's a wonderful buzzword. There's a series of buzzwords out there which everyone likes and quotes and doesn't really follow. And you take Kamati, which was the flagship project of the just energy transition, and it took an installation which agreed was getting to the end of its life, but still had life left in it, but with by policy being shut down, which used to employ 1,500 workers on the site and 2,500 workers in the mine. And it's gone from 4,000 to 250. And it's gone from 1,000 megawatts down to something in about 200 megawatts of intermittent power. And if that's just, and that's an energy transition, I don't know what is. So that's the culture. Now, just an aside for that is that, and I'm going to carry on this a little bit more, is that essentially what we should have been doing is repowering that 1,000 megawatt site with 1,000 megawatts of power. And I could argue whether that should be natural gas from pipelines that run past there or whether it should be nuclear, and that's a whole debate in itself. But the short answer is that Mpumalanga in this country has three industries. One industry is digging coal out the ground. One industry is burning the coal in power stations. And the third industry is growing mealies. And if we aren't careful, in 20, 30 years' time, the only industry in Mpumalanga would be growing mealies. And I think in terms of environmental justice, that's a pretty awful discussion, even if the environment's wonderful. So I think we've got to repower the sites in...
Tell me then, David, how much of the answer is in nuclear?
Oh, well, there's an interesting question. Because if you seriously want a currently proven technology, a credibly proven technology, which can generate available power 24/7, and can do it without releasing environmental issues into the environment, or CO2, you end up with only 3 solutions in the world that are currently working. One of those is hydro, in other words, using gravity and water. And unfortunately, we haven't got any water. I've heard rumors we have a water crisis country, so let's get real a second. If we lived in the Congo and were on the Grandinga Falls, different. The second one, in fact, is geothermal, which is brilliant if you live on a crack in the world. In other words, a place where you can drill down and get hot water out of the ground. Iceland does that brilliantly. Kenya does that. We haven't got that. And the third one is nuclear. And what always intrigues me in this discussion is that we've got a technology which has been demonstrated to be a commercially viable technology. It is generally to meet 100% of national needs, someone like France, and yet we have it not on the agenda. It's taken off the agenda. And we put on the agenda things like renewables, and then we carefully ignore the fact that we're now estimating, which wasn't in the plans, that to get renewables to work, you need 390 billion rands worth of grid investment, which is not actually credible.
Great.
If you just repower the current stations with a nuclear solution, then you keep the villages, you keep the transit, you lower the cost of the plant because you've got the grid systems, you've got the people, and that may be an answer. Not in the very short term, and everyone says, oh, but nuclear is too long to build. My answer is we've been arguing this case since 2006.
Should we have gone ahead with it when there was the controversy about whether we're doing it procedurally a few years ago?
So where's the pebble bed now? Where's the pebble bed now?
In China, China is now running 2 of them as commercial. They're committed to building 12 more. So
and in South Africa,
sorry?
What are the money you spent on it?
The smart centre is about a third of the annual budget for diesel fuel in Eskom. So it wasn't very much, and it was not gone forward with because it didn't fit into certain people's agendas. But the Chinese and the people of our team has now moved to the States. There's a firm called X Energy, which is funded by the US government, which is developing almost exactly a model of PBMR that was being developed in South Africa.
Right.
So the answer to the question is, we must believe in ourselves, not just in somebody else.
Thank you, David. Why have we been so afraid of the nuclear conversation in South Africa? Is it time to move in that direction?
Well, if we are going to discuss about nuclear energy, we have to be actually frank and very honest. It is carbon intensive. When it's operational, it is not. Let me be frank and very honest. When you have the nuclear reactor,
less CO2 than wind.
Less CO2 than wind. When you do the crushing, the milling, when you get the thing from the uranium ore, which is a brown rock to yellow cake uranium, you have to go through multiple processes, which is energy intensive and carbon intensive, given the South African context. We do not have any other energy which is not carbon light. So within the South African context specifically, because nuclear energy, just to produce it itself without actually getting the power, is already carbon intensive excessively. And then we have the issue of the waste, but I'm not getting there. The issue is the initial costs. We've already spent a lot of money that we don't have anything to prove. Now we're talking about something that we're talking about China, whatever. We had our belief, and then we couldn't prove it with our own research. What now?
Got you. You and Desigan both wanted to respond. I'm going to take these last 2 words from the panel and then take some questions from the audience and circle back to you, Prof. Yes. Let's start with you, Ngata.
I mean, one of the things that I was saying earlier on is we need to stop being superficial. We take examples from the global north, which have no relevance for our economies, for our context, for the issues that we are facing. In fact, we also have a deficit narrative where we're sitting here waiting to be helped by the north. The money is not coming. It hasn't arrived. It hasn't been allocated. So if we're thinking nuclear is, first, we don't afford it in the immediate term. 2, the crisis is too urgent that we can't wait anymore. And 3, it's also another consequence of what this has for livelihoods. So superficiality for me really doesn't work. We say we have policies in place, but we really don't consult enough. I mean, the PCC is a good structure, but it too has disappointed communities at large, if I may
PCC,
say.
why have you disappointed communities at large?
You've consulted on the JET-P framework. You've consulted, but then what next? What now? We have communities sitting saying, so what, you know? And so that's the issue, that the solutions we are presenting must speak to the needs on the ground.
I hear you, Ngatoka. I want Jessica to respond to that, why it is that we're not seeing the actual effects.
Can I do that and respond to
quickly?
others? Right. Well, first thing about nuclear, as a low-carbon option, it's actually really viable. It is a damn shame that South Africa did not go to the next steps on the PBMR. Those very Chinese companies came back in the day, Dave, to come and learn around what we were doing and worked it through. The message to that is very simple. You can't just keep talking about these IRP options over and over again. You have to be decisive, and you've got to move. Otherwise, you will be having the same discussion 10 years from now, first point. Second point is the high carbon value chain has not delivered for Mpumalanga. It just has not. It's got 40% unemployment, 60% if you take just the youth. It is also the most arable agricultural land in this country that's not under crops. There are many, many viable alternatives to the economic possibilities for Mpumalanga. But let's add one more to that. The thing that we haven't spoken about in this discussion yet is the other costs we're paying, the cost of environmental disasters on the back of climate change. So we keep banking on what we call a lower cost option with carbon, and we're paying on the other side with health and with these incredible environmental damage and infrastructure damage. We need to balance that out.
Okay.
Quickly to Lisa. Very quickly.
Quickly to Lisa.
Very quickly to Lisa. Yes, there is much more that needs to be done around engaging the communities and going back and engaging some more and keeping the story going and being honest about the narrative. The places that we have tried, like in Komati, have certainly shown dividend. And it points to the kind of formula that we really need to have everywhere else. But it can't just be the PCC doing it.
Fantastic. And that was actually from Ngatoka. Lisa, I'll bring you in later when I bring you in as well, Prof. I want to take two hands from this section. You, sir, your hand was up earlier as well, so I'll start with you, and then I'll make my way. I'll do it in twos, okay, across the room so we don't lose track of anyone. Mangale Ngabeput, your name and where you're from and your question briefly.
Thank you very much. My name is Thokozisi Kambule from TRSSA. Basically, mine is not a question, but a comment to say, specifically to respond to the professor there, to say we are here because of resources, nothing else. We are here because of Africa has coal. We are here because of ESCOM needs to be privatized. We are speaking renewables because of the international community, the international NGOs and the civic movement. I'm pumping up money into our people so that they can say coal is wrong, so that we can change from coal to renewable energy. We are finding ourselves here solely because of resources. My colleague is speaking about China. There's no coal in China. That is why they are doing solar panels. First, they spoke about ozone layer. That is affecting the ozone layer. Till today is nothing. Now
But
you have
there were
changed.
people here earlier who said they're from Mpumalanga and they're seeing how coal is destroying the community.
Yes,
Are you saying that's not true?
No, I'm not saying it's true, but we must be consulted. To consult is to interact with, learn from, and speak with the people that you are servicing. We are only speaking about Mpumalanga and only few particular places. That is why we must be consulted. It's only about resources.
So you believe communities should make the decision on what they want?
Yes, it's all about Europe wanting to loot here in Africa.
I've got
Nothing
you.
else. And we have.
Thank you, Budi. Thank you, thank you. There was another hand. You, please stand up. Remember our earlier conversation, keep it brief. Once you've made your point, I will move on.
My name is Siyabonga Maluka from VEM in Emalahleni, and my question to Professor Sam is, are you aware of the pollution that will be caused by your so-called energy mix? For us living in Emalahleni, we are surrounded by pollution. We breathe, we sleep, we eat pollution. If it's not from your Highveld Steel or from Gusile, any other power station, it's from the local communities itself. Because there are areas whereby, as Sbo has said, they don't have electricity. So your energy mix, are you aware of the pollution that will be caused? Because people are dying.
Samson Mampoli, please respond.
I'm very much aware. I am very much aware of the pollution. Can I respond?
Okay, let's let him respond, and
Can
then
I
we'll see what we
respond?
can do about the visit.
I'm very much aware of the pollution. By the way, I have a background in environmental sciences. So I understand the environmental pollution, the pollution that comes with the exploitation of coal. That's one. What I have said here is I'm talking about government plans to decarbonize, to move from the high carbon economy, from a carbon intensive economy to a low carbon intensive economy, and to reach what we call the net zero emissions by 2050. Now,
Remember, sorry,
I'm going to the crux. Let me go to the crux.
Let him respond.
Let me go to the crux. When we talk about net zero, it's because of awareness of what you have said. We are saying we must capture this carbon dioxide and these flue gases from these power stations, convert them into useful products. I'm running a project myself, sitting here. That is demonstrating. We've done it in Kelvin Power Station, where we captured the flue gases from these boilers, convert them into other useful products such as sulfuric acid and things like that. So when we start to talk about the net zero, we are saying
Flue gas desulfurization and carbon capture storage is two completely different things. I'm very sorry.
I'll come to that. I'll come to that. We have a number of things technically. You have your carbon capture and storage, you have your carbon capture and utilization.
Yes.
CGS just demonstrated.
CGU has not been demonstrated.
Can I respond?
Go for it.
CGS, the Council for Geoscience, has demonstrated a technology for carbon capture and storage. Right? Yes, it's a pilot. But what I'm saying, I'm responding to him to say, it's not like I'm saying we are not aware as government, as a representative of government. We are aware, but we are saying...
Prof, if I may, let me intervene. We have allowed you an opportunity to ask your question uninterrupted. And we need to allow other people in this venue to also have their say. Now, for that to happen, I'm going to require you to stop interrupting other people.
Thank you.
Is that fair?
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. So what we are saying is that the energy transition in South Africa must take into consideration everybody. And by everybody, sitting here, I'm not advocating for coal, I'm not advocating for nuclear, I'm not advocating for renewables, I'm advocating for the energy mix. And I'm also saying, government is saying the transition will happen, but it will happen at a pace that is affordable so that we don't destabilize the economy.
Gotcha.
And also, we are aiming for net zero by 2050.
Got you. Adil, I wonder if you can also respond to that earlier remark about how communities should actually be allowed basically an opportunity to decide if they want this sort of business to happen, where they stay, if you can call it that, and whether, in fact, the whole conversation is driven by a foreign agenda, especially when you talk about phasing coal out of the mix.
Yeah, I think the phasing coal out of the mix of South Africa is currently, just a pipe dream. You're not going to be able to do that. Remove coal out of South Africa, you have nothing. You're going to be sitting in the dark, you'll have worse cases of load shedding, and you will not have enough to keep up with the economy and provide for the needs of the people. So we are not, let's stop dreaming. Some of the things are practical and real, right? Let's talk about processes by which we can reach net zero by 1250 or 2060. Then we have achieved the goal, which is a just transition that gradually decarbonizes coal and move it into an environment where we have cleaned it. In the current IRP 2019, it speaks of using what we call HELE, high efficiency, low emissions. Why is government not implementing HELE technology in coal power plants where you can remove the emissions out of coal and make sure that the coal that is being produced? And the other thing is, everybody thinks that the smoke, what you see coming out of the power plants is smoke. No, that is called vapor. It's water, it's vapor. It's not smoke. So some of the things you have to understand. You see that crowd there, let me explain to you. Yeah, no. Let me explain. There's a problem called desulfurization process. So you must understand that there's a process in the power plant called the desulfurization. So we can't have a silly debate where we're going to be arguing with people who are set up to just disagree with everything. So let's be very clear about facts and points.
The reality, though, is this, Adele, that everyone who is here has an equal opportunity to respond. Whether we agree or disagree, we can't dismiss anyone's voice in the conversation. We can disagree.
But they cannot interject.
We can disagree.
They cannot interject and disapprove of the point which we're making.
That's why I've
we're very clear about it.
That's why I've tried to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. What I'm saying is, thank you, Puti. Puti, thank you. We have heard you. I thank you.
You know what touches me, my brother? When you said that smoke is a...
It's a vapor. It is a fact. It's vapor. It's vapor.
Let her finish.
It's a fact.
The cooling towers.
Yes, from the cooling towers, it's a vapor.
Adele, let's let her... Remember, you wanted to be allowed to finish without interruption.
I was interrupted.
Yeah, but I extend the same courtesy to another panelist. Ma'am.
You know that smoke. Us as women, we gave deformed children through that smoke, through that thing you call it vapor. You know how health-wise it kills the society. It kills, it cuts the lives short. We cannot call that it's just a smoke. It's a vapor. Today, we have parents at home that they are staying with kids that they can't walk, they can't move, they can't do anything. Please.
Samson Mampweli, briefly, I want you to settle this. Is what we see coming out of those towers killing the people? Is that what's causing the problem? Is it part of the problem?
So there are two things.
Briefly.
Two emissions from the power station. There is the smokestack, which is where the flue gases come out of. And then you have the cooling towers, where you have the water being used to cool down the systems, and then that's where you get your steam coming out of the system. So that's basically what is happening.
Dr. Munich,
but
the issue of emissions, the issue of emissions, how do we deal with that? How do we respond?
I'm really surprised that an expert on this panel talks about vapor when the real issue is emissions that have clearly health impact. I'm just surprised. I don't understand the tactics that are being used.
You use the word tactic, and I'm going to bring in, I saw your hand, sir, you as well. I want us to talk about, Dr. While I have you, how much of the conversation around the environment and environmental justice has basically been taken over by multiple agendas on either side, and how much of that has then compromised the quality and accuracy of the information that we put out there?
I think there are two things. There's a South African agenda where we, based on evidence, honestly, sincerely discuss with each other what to do. That's called a purposive transition. We decide the purposes, we decide how it happens, but then it must be sincere discussion of agendas. There are other agendas that are not sincere, that want to slow down the transition because they want to make money, either from coal or from nuclear.
Gatako?
One of the things that enable this kind of rhetoric around vapor versus smoke is the fact that we're missing the gendered lens in our transition. It's very silent, because if we don't apply a gendered lens, we miss the realities that women face based on this light thing, which is vapor. We miss the consequences that unravel at the level of the household. So the fact that the gendered lens is very silenced in how we approach the transition, in how we plan for it, and in how we attract the kinds of investments that we need, results to this kind of disappointment that we're talking about here.
So I'm looking for groundwork. Where's groundwork? Oh, you, sir. We have seen and heard you. I'll come back to you later, okay?
Thank you.
So what's your question?
My name is Shannon Merricks from Kliptown. My plea to the professor and all other people in government that's not politicians, stop being politicians. In the 5th administration, you as professors were saying to us, nuclear is right under Zuma. On the 6th administration under Ramaphosa, you said no independent power producers. Now in the 7th administration, you say mixed masala. We don't know.
Hang on. Two people. There are two people I want to respond. Desigan, Professor, you guys are basically giving everyone whiplash because it's a different message with each president. What's going on? Desigan? I'm going to give you as well.
Wait. Firstly, a little bit of advice to Samson. You don't have to sacrifice your scientific integrity. Seriously, the facts are pretty clear.
Yeah.
Let's look at where we're at, right? We were talking about enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to restrict it in a way that we only get to 1.5 degrees, plus 1.5 degrees by 2100. The audited figures for 2023 is we are plus 1.48 degrees. This is how bad it already is. So let the science be clear. There is a huge disinformation campaign openly being pushed by oil and gas. We understand that they need to survive, but we have to be clear. Don't mix it up with the science.
Samson Mampeli?
I want to respond to the mixed masala. There has never been something like that to begin with. The IRP 2010 was promulgated during the 5th administration of Jacob Zuma. And it had an energy mix. So it's not like us, we said during back then, nuclear is bad and all that. The issue around nuclear that was picked up then was around the cost and the manner in which it was going to be procured. That was the main issue. It was not about
it was more procedural than merit.
Yes, it was the cost and the procedure that was followed. That's why we are saying it has always, in nuclear, by the way, IRP 2010, if you go there, it's got, if I'm not mistaken, Dave will tell you, it's got about 9,000 megawatts of nuclear energy. It's there. It was the cost and it was those two things that we were dealing with.
Okay, I want to bring in, I've seen your hands, gentlemen, but I want to bring in some women into this conversation because, Ngadeko, you spoke about how gendered some of these problems are. Ma'am, if I can ask you to please walk this way because I might not be able to make it up there, and I'll meet you halfway. Your name and where you're from.
I'm Thokozile Mtambo from Soweto in Snake Park. So in Snake Park, we are affected by post-mining, whereby we are suffering the consequences of the 1886 gold mine rush. The vapor that the guy is talking about, it's called the radioactivity. And we have women here who are giving birth to children with deformities. They cannot walk, they cannot talk, they cannot even take themselves to the toilet. And now you've been challenging the mines. When are they willing to come and rehabilitate the dump? They're only willing to remine. So what is more urgent between rehabilitating and remining?
Okay, Adele, I'm going to give you briefly a chance. Do you want to walk back what you said about the vapor?
No, I'm not going to walk it back. I'm giving you a fact now. I'm not walking it back. So let me make it clear. The vapor does not cause radioactivity. That's simple as that. So let's not mix the sciences and mix the facts. The current issues that is being suffered in terms of the acid drain mine issue there in Soweto and the areas where there was gold mining and everything, it's an issue that is serious. It has to do with acid drain mines and as well the mining that happened in the past. And that is an issue that government should have, on a single level, attended to it from an environmental justice point of view. They didn't do that. It has nothing to do with the vapor that we are referring to. It has to do with government's negligence. That is why you see all of these mountains of leftover mine dumps, unattended to, non-rehabilitated. And the money to rehabilitate it has all been gone. Why?
I think what people found upsetting, Adele, is the fact that you chose to focus on the vapor when there is the issue of emissions that are causing harm.
Let me come back to the emissions.
I think that is
on
what
the point of
people.
emissions, South Africa's emissions have reduced in the last 5 years.
But they exist.
It's a fact. It's a fact. I'm explaining to you. So,
hang on.
Okay. Today's emissions level.
Hear me out.
Let's give you facts now.
It's one thing. They may have reduced.
Thank you.
But that matters not when you live in an area where you are still affected.
We are decarbonizing. We are reducing emissions.
That if you live there, it matters less.
I've lived in Mpumalanga. I have lived in Soweto, so I know the conditions that people are talking about.
Okay. Yes. I'm looking for our one day. I'm going to come to you, Awande, now, because I want to bring you in as well, because you've been listening. I'll let you hold the mic for yourself. Your input.
I think it's quite interesting that this conversation, which has a broad range of issues that we should be covering in terms of environmental justice, has kind of been hijacked by the energy question because of some of the spinning that's happening in the room. And I think the young lady from Snake Park actually also kind of helped us expand, and the gentleman over there, when you're talking about that, these questions fundamentally get to the heart of our society and how we transform South African society. The focus on energy and the importance of coal in our system and our structure of this country goes far deep to the colonial and apartheid roots of this country. It's the same thing when people dangle jobs over our heads to say that we must protect these industries because jobs are at stake. It's the same thing that was happening in the past. And I think we've let a lot of the people off on the panel off the hook by not really focusing on some of these structural issues.
And what should be the approach then to responding to those issues, and what should climate justice look like?
So that's the heart of the question that I hope we would get to that point today. And it's about complete societal transformation, nothing else. The aspirations that we had when we transitioned from '94 into a post-apartheid state, those same fundamental aspirations are held within the question of a just transition. But I'm going to use the term deep just transition because just transition has been captured. And I think that the gentleman from the Presidential Climate Commission also has a lot to answer for, because there's not just this domestic agendas at play, but there are international agendas at play. And our country in South Africa, with the JET IP, has positioned itself in a particular way which has a lot of problematic elements, particularly in the terms of how we look at our responsibility, but also our role as a global South country with leadership in directing where the struggle goes. So not just with regards to how we transform our society for ourselves, but as the highest emitter on the African continent and one of the highest traditional emitters of the developing world, how then do we position ourselves to speak on behalf of other countries?
Awande, thank you. Sir, you've been wanting to speak for a while.
My name is Kabelo Mloy from Orlando. I'm with my team here, Biodiversity Action Plan. And my main concern, Mina, is about the rivers, the contaminated rivers. It's a very serious crisis.
Explain what it looks like in your daily reality.
The rivers are like, you know, the sewer. The rivers used to be clean. Now the rivers are running the sewer, and the waste and the industrials, you know, they're taking their waste to the rivers. And
So companies are dumping in the rivers?
Yes, are dumping in the rivers. And another question that I have from my brothers and sisters here who are doing a very great job.
Please hold up your mic so we can
Who are doing a very great job is that, you know, when you do recycling, not everything you're recycling is paying. So they are choosing from the waste. So what happens to the waste that doesn't benefit them?
Okay.
Where does it go?
Cool. I'm going to, I remember you, sir, you've had your hand up also for the longest time. I'm going to come to you, ma'am, and ma'am, you had your hand up as well, right? Because I do want to have more women in the conversation, as you, and you as well, so you'll probably be the last one. White jacket. Name and where you're from.
I'm Letabo from Pimville, and I kind of want to make a comment about like every interaction Adil has had with everyone. I think it's very discouraging to see you say that people should be devoid of emotion when entering this conversation, because when you're in a place of privilege, it's very easy to get wrapped up in the fancy jargon, and people hearing the jargon you think is you doing them a favor. You know, they don't have the privilege of just being a hypothetical or just being a number. And my question is, how do you not have emotion? How does hearing the stories of the people in this audience not radicalize you? That's why everything is the way it is, because no one wants to have emotion, because no one wants to care.
Let's have, all right? Thank you. I'm going to come back to you. Adil, do you want to respond? Okay. Ma'am?
My name is Uhuru.
Hold on.
And yes, before I go to my question,
Briefly, please.
Very briefly, to the gentleman, I lost half of my family because of asthma. I come from the Val. I got divorced 2010. I never had a relationship because no man wants to sleep near a woman who you can feel when they are sleeping, you can hear them breathe because of my lungs, because of the vapor that comes from ISCO, then the vapor that comes from Sasol that affect us. It's so sad that I'm sitting here and I know how it feels like. I have a 11-year-old grandson who can't use a perfume spray or a cologne because of his lungs. I have a 2-year-old grandson who can't breathe. He goes 2 weeks to crash, 2 weeks home because of the lungs. Then this is my simple question. I want to ask government. We know we have waste pickers. They are formalized. What are you doing to assist those who are not formalized, just to give them the basics, the gloves, the mask, things that they can use, because they are also contributing on terms of assisting to have a clean environment.
Right.
And the other challenge is, can't you have a hotline like gender-based violence hotline that will assist them, because they pick up dead bodies every time at the dumping site? Thank you.
Right, thank you, ma'am. Vicky, you wanted to say, I'm going to come to you as well. You wanted to say something earlier. Let me, don't worry.
Thank you, Tembekile. My name is Mduduzi Chabalala from VAL. I'm with Extinction Rebellion VAL and other various environmental justice movement. I had a lot of comments to make.
Give me top one.
One is that the government has always been deliberate in terms of delaying the just transition. For instance, the issue of net zero is quite an old issue. I remember coming from the NDP. It was introduced in 2012 in the National Development Plan, which has failed dismally. And simply because the fossil fuel industry has an agenda which they don't want to let go of. I want to bring the issue of, for instance, continuation of fossil fuel, for instance, coal power stations. Little is talked about where will the water come from. A lot of factors are not considered. For instance, even though energy crisis will be a priority issue to focus in, climate change is not postponing, and unfortunately, it is happening, it has been happening. Little factors like climate change refugees are not being factored, and they are there in the south coast of South Africa. For instance, the earth is warming. Most power stations are not going to be able to stand the heat that is coming. We have seen that in the previous years. A few power stations were closed. For instance, the demand of nuclear in France, the heat wave in France in 2018, 2019 forced nuclear power stations to be shut down due to the heat wave.
Thank you.
About more than 22 nuclear power stations have been decommissioned now in less than 2 years in France. South Africa is never going to be ready, and I
So
think
you feel South Africa is not serious, there isn't a commitment?
it's not serious. For instance, it is not going to be ready because it has been deliberately delayed by fossil fuel industry. And the delay, the delay is causing us to miss out on better opportunities that are there. Yes.
Do, right? Thank you. I'm looking for a Charles Simane. Where's Charles? Oh, Charles was unable to make it. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Masoko Mokhwezi from the African Climate Alliance. I just want to make a point to Adil, government officials as well. I think you need to be very careful of how you address community members, because they are the ones that bear the brunt of climate-related realities. And I firmly do believe that it is pivotal to outline issues that they go through which are aligned with climate-related issues such as education, food security, agriculture. If corporate entities and government officials can look into that, that would be great. But that's a point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you so much. David, do you want to say something as well earlier?
Shall I say something now? I'm sorry.
I think you can stand.
Okay.
You should stand.
Old age. Just a quick comment, and I come back to the lady from Oxfam. Is Oxfam?
Yes,
Yeah. I just worry sometimes that, and I met this a lot when I was in ESCOM, of what I call the phantom solution. In other words, somebody works out something that works on the lab, like carbon capture, and, you know, it's running in Germany. Whatever it is, and I'll tell you, but that runs in China and they're building more. But the issue is, you end up with people saying, because this seems a nice idea, it'll be economic and make sense. And I'll use a couple of examples. And
Briefly, please.
Somebody mentioned green hydrogen. It is interesting to note that green hydrogen is being driven by a subsidy system.
Yes.
Their current cost of production is about $4 a kilogram, which is about, I think, 6 times the price of commercial hydrogen, and no one can see a way of bringing it down. But you have this projection of something will solve the problem. The best example ever is batteries. We had our first battery in the world in 1859. We're still using those batteries in your car, by the way. It's called lead acid. And yet we believe somehow the PCC's business case for its version of the IRP assumes the price of lead acid batteries will fall by a factor of 4 between now and 2040. Unfortunately, battery technology is well understood, and the cost of your lead acid battery is 85% materials. So that price reduction is not really going to happen. It's not Moore's law. So we have these phantom solutions.
Let's let him finish, because I'm going to give the panel last word.
So the thing I'm saying is we're very careful when we have a model, a phantom solution which says it's okay if we ignore something. And a good example is the whole renewable thing is based upon a 300, they now realize, no one noticed it before, 390 billion rand of high voltage lines to make the renewable program work.
Okay.
Versus let's put some power on Kamati and then you don't need a new power line.
Thank you, David. There was one more guy that I want to speak to. You, sir, because you've had your hand up from the beginning. Your name and where you're from?
Hi, my name is Braga. I'm actually from Orlando, same country as this gent. This is more of a question. So another environmental issue that we have here in South Africa, other than Umjolo, I repeat, other than Umjolo, is the fact that our ministers are very old. When you started off your show, you showed a couple of clips, 2 ministers. The first minister was Utatu Mantashe. Utatu Mantashe is that old to an extent. He's supposed to be sitting at home playing with his grandchildren. Because those people don't even understand the difference between your smoke, your water vapors, and whatsoever. But basically what I'm trying to say is, up until we get to that point whereby we say we get a cabinet that consists of young people as the gent over here, people that have a better understanding of the challenges that we are facing as a society, as a young black gent that I am. But up until then, South Africa is going nowhere slowly.
Thank you, brother. Ma'am, I'm going to let you have the last word. Oh my God, you wanted to speak?
Oh, yeah.
Have you forgotten?
Okay, mine is short and brief, because I think also with the just energy transition, we don't have to be more into deeper thinking of questions, because the just transition is broad. We are not really focusing on energy because we have to shift with energy only. Everything have to shift.
Okay.
With our waste, our education, our everything. Then we have to prioritize, and we are clear within Emalahleni to say we need energy, we need land, we need food, we need water. Is our priorities, so that the rest must follow. Young people can think of their own future. Let everything start on the ground. Because what we are feeling on the ground as an organization and as communities, we feel that there is a lot of questions than how do we want it, how do we want to see the just transition as communities on the ground.
Thank you, sis.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We're closing it up now. The hour is almost up. Panelists, final word. You respond to what people have said, but I think fundamentally, that question that we came to, the issue of environmental justice. What should it look like in South Africa going forward? I'll start here.
I mean, environmental justice, it should, as I've said earlier, it should be a bottom-up approach. Decisions should not be done without consulting people, and people need to be at the center of that decision making. So, I mean, if it should not follow the same exploitative process, but it should be just, and the decisions must not be taken on behalf of the people. Government must go to the communities, and they must hear what is it that people want on the ground. They've highlighted issues that they are facing in Mpumalanga. We should not be repeating the same process now, like looking at the recent different policies that are still proposing of these projects that are detrimental and are coming at the cost of people's livelihoods. And at the same time, we still have policies that are pushing for exploitation of more fossil fuels, yet we are already in a crisis in South Africa. So we need people's voices to be heard, and we are saying people before profit.
Next minute. Final thoughts?
Yes, I agree with my brother who says we need a deep, just transition. I agree with what you are saying. So climate change is just a big crisis. There are many other environmental crises because we think in the wrong way. And one aspect I want to highlight, what is the role of experts? Is the role of experts to defend the elite and the current system? Or is the role of experts to listen to what people want and make it happen instead of telling us it's not possible?
Yes, I think in terms of parting points, on the point that was made, or the discussion around technology and clean coal technology, I think it's just a way to kick the can down the road and delay action. Because if you look at the cost, number one, of clean coal compared to how much we're actually solving or how much we're contributing to solving the problem, it's very marginal. And I think also, as we've seen today, the discussion around specialists, who are most of the time disregarding the voices of community, and they are the ones who are supposed to, or proposing that they are the ones who should lead the discussion. I think that's one thing that we need to dismantle. And the question as to what climate justice looks like, I think climate justice looks like putting people at the front of the conversation, as Lisa had mentioned, and understanding that these people on the ground have the lived experience, and that is something that is very important to take into account. Specialists cannot, you don't know everything yourself, and I think a final question also, or final point as well. Climate change is not the problem. Climate change is the consequence. It's like if you have a flu, you're not going to focus on the cough, you're going to focus on the virus. And what that virus looks like is systems of exclusion, or systems that are built on exclusion, that exclude people on the ground. And I think the most important thing is that we need to include those who are most affected and center their voices in the discussion, because that's an opportunity for us to change the system as a whole.
Thanks for the opportunity and the invite. And I think one must be very cautious. You can't set up a debate in this nature and you want to have everybody agree to a point of view. There are certain point of view we're going to give you which you might not like, but they are fundamentals. And trying to silence us or censor us into our opinion and views is not going to help the debate. So this is a big debate, and we're supposed to be broad in thinking. And we're presenting.
Are you saying I censored you?
No, not you. I'm talking about. See, what happens is you have to your right, and mostly to the majority of the group here, already fixed in an idea. So when you challenge the paradigm, they chicken out and become a little bit fragile and not want to open their mindset. So I'm saying to you is, this is our country. We're going nowhere. We're going to be here. We're going to change. We're going to transform it. So you have to understand, when we give you some of these opinions and views, they are views that we study and we specialize in and we understand. So we're not making up things. Prof said something here which didn't really make sense, because, you cannot attack us as experts, knowing fully well that what we do is understand, live and breathe this information. So on the issue of the environmental justice, all right, which is something that most people are overlooking, there is a lot of problems in South Africa. Big companies, big conglomerates that have polluted, that have abused the environment, that have mined, that have done production, that have done all of these things. Most of them have gone with profit scot-free without paying any retribution nor reparation for the environment they have caused here. Okay. We even have environmental degradation. We have mines that are currently even environmentally rehabilitated. When you ask for a DMRA, they tell you there's no money for those mines. A minimum of 10 billion should be spent and set aside for a mine for rehabilitation. When you ask for those funds, they're not there. So some of these things, when we give you facts, understand we're not doing it out of malicious. The fact that you say that we are not insensitive, we are very sensitive. I'm an African, I'm a black person in this country. I understand poverty not out of statistics. I understand poverty because I grew out of it. So these are fundamental facts. Okay. And we understand the issues. On issues of making sure we are transitioning from coal, we have all agreed that coal will be transitioned in 2050. There will be net zero environment. Gotcha. It is not an option. We are moving into that. with the gradual plan and processes. But it cannot be haphazard. We have seen the load shedding crisis. That caused the lights to be off because we rushed into closing down ESCOM.
Got you. Nkateko?
We can't keep shifting the goalpost. What I want to highlight as an important factor for at least coming from a feminist organization is the fact that we really need to be serious about the gender issues. The fact that we look over them or apply to rhetoric really doesn't work for our communities. We need to move beyond, the promise in terms of community consultation, but really dig deep to understand the issues. There are some great lessons that we can draw from the gender movement, if I may say, in terms of the kind of activism that we want to see in the climate space. I'm very worried and would like to caution us not only as activists, but also as development practitioners in the space about the looming climate justice capture that is coming to us. If you look at the discourse increasingly from experts to people represented in international fora around climate justice issues are male-dominated. And also there's the grave danger of the narrative from communities being captured, particularly from actors in the corporate sector, Sasol, Shell, everybody else. There is an active lobby that's really seeking to quash us. And lastly also is mentioning the fact that there is a shrinking civic space out there, particularly for us who are working on these issues. And based on this dedicated lobby, we are seeing our activists being threatened on a daily basis. This is an important issue to highlight in terms of the people who are putting their lives on the line to defend the work that we're doing, to defend our livelihoods and the planet. So this is something that we really need to be serious about.
And to the point you're making, I think that then brings us to you, Nonhle, because where you're from, people have paid with their lives for the environment.
We are talking about 2050. 2050 is too far. It's too far. We are dying right now. We need to change now, not tomorrow. Let's not talk about 2050. Where I come from, we are experiencing the climate catastrophe. And we are heading to a poverty because the more the heat, the more security food is going down. The more floods, the more infrastructure, a government need more money. All those kind of things that we are suffer. But at the same time, as my brother at the back was talking about the rivers that are being polluted, it's not only the rivers. Right now, our ecological crisis that we are facing, we were collecting the medical waste, which is being dumped to our ocean. Our ocean is being filled with the waste. And when the ocean is being filled with waste, the sea rise. We the one we pay the brand. That is why what we're talking about is not just we are making a theory, but at the end of the day, when we defend, when we stand up, we speak as communities, we the one we've been targeted because they said that jobs must be put in the center. Whose jobs must be put in the center? Because our livelihood is being compromised in the names of jobs. Those jobs are not for us, are for big corporates, are not for us. And we pay the brunt of the climate change. And at the end of the day, our own people are being used to attack those environmental activists that they are blocking jobs. They are making South Africa to not being developed. Even our own ministers, they just called our communities that we are special type of colonialists because we don't want to see Africa or South Africa to be developed.
Gotcha.
Development must come from the people, not from the top.
Gotcha. Yes, again.
Yes. Well, first thing I want to say is that it was really useful to listen. And the conversation has been really great. And I just want to reflect on the three justices that there are in the just transition framework. The first justice is procedural justice. And this is exactly what you're talking about, around organizing for maximum participation in the decision making. For those of us, and there are some of us that are not too far away from the levers of power where these decisions are made, we really have to develop bigger ears and listen to people in a non-judgmental way and learn. And I think this is absolutely critical. At the same time, we need to increase the agency of people. Because one of the things that happens in the slate is some people have a lot of technical information and a lot of people don't. And that dominates the conversation.
Right.
We need to equalize that. The second justice is distributive justice. It's a critical thing, that we must all get the benefits of the transition to a more energy secure South Africa, a more energy secure Africa, and a more energy secure world. We cannot follow the pathway of a monopolization. And the thing that wasn't raised in any of the discussions this evening, and I'm surprised by that, is the issue of privatization.
I did raise privatization, I think to a degree, but what do you want us to talk about specifically?
Well, we must tread this very carefully. Do we want to organize for a transition to a low carbon system, mostly on renewables, on the back of a privatization agenda or a public access agenda? And what does that mean? I think that's really, really critical. And then the third justice is the one we talk about the least, and that's restorative justice. We come from a dismal past that's been very closely aligned to the mining industry and more broadly the energy mining complex in this country. We have to reorganize the characterization of society to a more equal society and a more inclusive economy using this transition to help us to get there.
Ulrich, final word.
To just define what a just energy transition will look like for me would be progressive, transformative, and inclusive development that leaves no one behind, in short. But we have to be very honest when we're having these discussions. There's multiple agendas at play when it comes to the energy debate, the climate change debate within South Africa. We have had, I would say, a failed rollout of renewable energy systems within South Africa, whereby the communities now have to look at renewable energies as failed systems, because we had the rollout of solar-powered geysers with people that were not properly trained in. So now the perception from the people on the ground is that renewable energy doesn't work, whereby it's not the case. It is the installation people did not do their job properly. Secondly, if we have money for expensive stuff such as nuclear power and as car power ships, we do have the money for something such as concentrated solar power, which would produce the base load that people are talking about. However, it has been derailed by political interfering and economic interfering, whereby external companies got profit and got benefit, whereby South Africans weren't employed. So we need to be honest and say that there is alternatives to the status quo that is at hand. However, there's vested interest within the fossil fuel industry, as well as in the nuclear industry, to keep things as it is, because they are getting the benefit. And whilst we are being uninformed and being misinformed by these failed projects, they are getting away with all the money and we are suffering. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you to all of you on the panel. And thank you as well in the audience. And most importantly, thank you to all of you who are still watching. This has been another episode of The Big Debate, focusing on environmental justice. We're back again 6 p.m. next Thursday on S3, the SABC News channel, and on YouTube. Thank you for watching. This is The Big Debate.